Welcome to the DplusCast, where we discuss everything Disney Plus and beyond in the world of streaming entertainment. On this episode, Disney Plus jumps into the Emmy race, Beyonce takes over the world, and the Muppets, well, they're officially in the streamosphere. Let's get after it.
It's time to play the music. It's time to light the light. It's time to meet the Muppets on the Muppet Show tonight.
Hey guys, how you doing?
Doing all right. Hanging in there. Watching some Muppets.
You think we'll ever get in the same room again to record together?
I hope so. I think so. I think the question is, can we keep the podcast going for that long?
It's August 2020 now. I think by this time next year, we could very possibly be in a room together. That's my best case scenario.
That's your goal.
Yeah.
That's your benchmark.
That's my benchmark. A year from now, if we could do that, I'll be happy.
So Greg mentioned that it is August, and it's the beginning of August, which means, the first day of a new month is always very exciting for somebody who streams a lot, because that means it's you know what it is? It's like the trade deadline in baseball. Like, movies and TV shows, they hop from Netflix to Hulu, and then you've got, like, Top Gun just got dropped on Amazon Prime, and this and that, and things are coming to Disney Plus that used to be on Netflix. It's very exciting. So this month, August, coming to Disney Plus, we got the good, the bad, and the ugly. So Prince of Persia, Sands of Time.
Ugly?
Who's excited to watch that one?
Is that bad or ugly? There's no way it's good.
I don't know. The Greatest Showman. Did you guys see The Greatest Showman?
Oh, I love The Greatest Showman.
I did not.
The music from The Greatest Showman's excellent. I still have yet to sit down and actually watch the movie, though.
There's a few. I don't know. The music is great. There's a few good scenes, including the one where Zac Efron and they're in the bar and they make the agreement. That's really well done.
Okay, cool. The Peanuts movie. Did you guys see the Peanuts movie?
I adore the Peanuts movie.
I still haven't seen it, but I love Peanuts. So
it is a
Charlie
wonderful update to the Peanuts legacy, and maybe my favorite Peanuts thing yet. It's fantastic.
Wow. Cool.
Yeah.
Well, that's dropping this month. X-Men, the original one, which that movie is what, 21 years old, 20 years old at this point.
Wow.
Oh boy.
I'm old.
Yeah. And, some Marvel. We got Ant-Man and the Wasp coming to Disney Plus. Alice Through the Looking Glass, which I won't be watching. And the Beauty and the Beast live-action remake, it's not for me. It's just not for me.
Have you seen it?
Yeah, I went and saw it in the theater.
Yeah. I haven't seen it yet, so I don't know. I'll turn it on and then turn it off.
You get to a certain age, where you just sort of, instead of just saying something's bad, maybe I'm just resigned to think that that's just not for me. It's just not for me. It can exist. It's just not for me. And things don't have to be for me. And I don't have to love everything. I can move on with my life.
I think that is potentially relevant for today's discussion.
But big news this week was the Emmy nominations.
Oh, yeah.
As if anybody was paying attention, the Emmys were announced, and, The Mandalorian nabbed 15 nominations. I don't know how one show can fall under 15 categories. That's sort of my main criticism of the Emmys. There's too many categories, so they just sort of, each category is diluted by default. But yeah, The Mandalorian, outstanding drama series. Greg, what do you think about that?
I'm cool with Mandalorian being nominated for that. It's a hell of a good time. Should it win? I don't know. I don't know that it's really the right show to win. But that's not my issue. You said that you think that there's too many categories, but truthfully, I feel like the categories are flawed. And I'd almost, I don't want to say I'd like to see more categories, but I feel like the lines that dictate what falls into what category is always an issue, and not just with the Emmys, but with things like the Golden Globes and things like that. But
so we're gonna introduce something here. We'll see if it becomes a recurring segment, but it seems like each week Greg has some nits to pick and some grievances to air.
Oh yeah.
So I'm going to give him this release. So Greg, whatever topic you would like. I know this week you'd like to talk Emmys. You have 60 seconds starting now.
Okay, so here's my beef with the Emmys this year, all right? There's a lot of great stuff nominated, and there's a lot of, great, that's wonderful. But there's some things that just seem wrong. For example, outstanding supporting actor in a comedy series. Lots of comedic performances in here, and also Sterling K. Brown as Reggie on The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel. Now, great, Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, definitely a comedy series, but Sterling K. Brown, not a comedic actor and not a comedic performance. So how can you compare a guy playing a dramatic role against Kenan Thompson on SNL? These don't belong in the same category. It's just wrong. You can't compare these things. It should be comedic performance, not actor in a comedy, because you just inherently can't compare these things. My only other beef that I'll touch on right now.
15 seconds.
Brad Pitt should not have been nominated for SNL. Okay, this was a guy sitting in his living room zooming into a show. He does not deserve an award for acting.
3,
That's absurd.
2,
the end.
1. Ring the bell. Okay, so I understand your grievances, especially with the Brad Pitt, Anthony Fauci bit on SNL. I just can't. I don't care. I mean, I don't care. I cannot bring myself to care at all. And if I'm doing the Emmys this year, frankly, I would love if they just canceled the Emmys. But just cancel them. Just cancel them. Just be done. Just don't make it a show. Just give out the awards, and don't even go through with it. But they want Brad Pitt sitting in his living room to zoom in on the Emmys and accept an award. And you know what? We all know that Emmys it's a running joke in the industry that Emmys are worthless.
No, that's the Golden Globes. Emmys are supposed to be the Oscars of television. It's supposed to be.
It never has been. Remember on The Sopranos when the TV writer tried to pawn his Emmy to pay Christopher back, and the pawn guy was just like, I mean, an Academy Award, maybe, but an Emmy, what am I going to do with this?
It is a very flawed system.
Counterpoint, I do think that the zoom in Emmys are going to create a lot of content for people like us. Like, can we have our own award show for who has the best backgrounds in their Zoom pictures? Which celebrities are going to go with like the very blank white background to make it not seem like they're super rich? I think that part will be interesting if we actually get an Emmy show.
I find the musicians to have because they all have their own personal recording studios.
That's true.
They seem to have the most boring of backgrounds because they just put up a curtain in front of wherever they're like recording vocals and they do their Zoom calls. I think when people talk about Emmys and Grammys in particular too, it sort of just becomes like a sports team where you root for the show that you watch. Because like with the Oscars, you get your nominations and you're just like, okay, well, I'll catch up on the movies. I'll just watch them all. Cool. Excellent. With the Emmys, it's like, I can't watch all of these shows. So inherently, you just start saying like, you know what? Succession's got to win. Well, no, I think Mandalorian should win. Did you watch Succession? No. Oh, well, that's why.
Yeah, I think that's totally valid because I haven't seen most of these shows.
Exactly. So I guess that's why I can't care, because I did not catch up on TV watching this past year. It was too much. I've yet to watch Watchmen. I've yet to catch up on Succession. There's a lot to watch, too much, and I can't care about awards being handed out this year. So I'm sorry, Greg.
Oh, no, I also don't care about the rewards in general.
Yeah, and they give out like 170 statues.
Yeah, but I want one day, so I'm gonna be.
Listen, I feel if someone was offering me an Emmy, I would care a lot more about the Emmys. I'm just stuck in my house currently, so I just can't care about the Emmys.
Yeah.
Let's see. So also this week, did you guys get to check out Black is King, Beyonce's visual album?
I did not yet.
That's fine. So I watched some of it, and I've yet to finish it. So I think this is one of those things, like I mentioned earlier, that not everything needs to be for me. And frankly, I don't think anybody's looking for a white dude's take on Beyonce's visual album that's like celebrating Black and African American culture.
But are you going to give us that take, or?
No,
okay.
No, I'm not. Did you guys watch Lemonade when it came out on HBO a few years ago?
I did not.
Lemonade was a masterpiece, as far as I'm concerned. I thought it was just brilliant, visually stunning. A lot of talented music video directors contributing to that, including Jonas Ackerlund and Mark Romanek, who has directed like every famous Jay-Z music video you've ever heard of. He's directed. Now, those guys didn't come on board this project because this was more focused on lifting up like African directors, up-and-comers. So it was sort of, getting black people to tell black stories, that whole thing, right? This is all I want to say. Every single Instagram post, every single Facebook post, every single tweet that has been promoting Black is King, there's always someone right below that says, well, if they had something called White is King,
Jesus Christ,
you all would say it's racist. So I just want to nip this in the bud quickly to those people who think that way. If you were listening to this, I'm just going to say that white is not a culture. Okay? And the only reason black is a culture is because white people, when they trafficked Africans over to the Americas, they stripped those Africans of their culture and slapped the name black on their back. So that is why black is a culture in America and around the world. So that's why you're never going to see white is king, because it makes no sense. And that's all I have to say. I hope all of you who enjoyed Black is King enjoyed it greatly. The fashion in it is awesome. There's a lot of drone shots. I remember you used to watch something and you'd see like a helicopter shot and you're like, oh man, that's a sweet helicopter shot. Now you get like 17, 18 drone shots within like 45 seconds, and they've lacked their luster, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, I mean, you see drone shots and TikToks now, so like, it is what it is.
But, speaking of social media and TikToks, you're talking about, you've got this big Beyonce release, right? And it is dominating social media and Twitter for 19 hours, and now it's gone. Like, what does anything stick these days? Can anything stick for longer than like 24, 48 hours?
Well, that's what Disney Plus is trying. I mean, they're not putting out a ton of content, but with Mandalorian, it stuck for longer. Because why? Because they did a weekly release. They're also doing the same thing with the show that we're going to talk about this week. But I don't know that this show has the audience or the legs of a Mandalorian. But yeah, I'd say that it's very difficult to capture the attention of the world on in any sort of consistent basis nowadays, unless you're attempting things like weekly releases, slow burns.
Like the Last Dance is another example of something that, I mean, it was
Last
not
Dance kept
a
that
monoculture moment, but it was like every week you would see people talking about it. But that's, even then, it's hard to get like that. You talk about that episode that night, and then everything else fills the news until the next week. Yeah,
but at least you get like one day a week you're talking about that show, Well, I guess that sums everything else up. So let's, when we come back, we're going to talk a little Muppets history and talk about the latest iteration of the Muppets, Muppets Now on Disney+. We'll be right back.
A Disney Plus announcement with Kermit the Frog and Joe from Legal. Wait, what? Joe, we're shooting something here to help spread the word about how the Muppets are creating an incredible new show for Disney Plus.
Mm-hmm. I'm listening.
So I'm not a Muppets expert, nor am I a Muppets super fan, but I feel like the Muppets have always been in my life, and my life is always better when they are in my life. So let's start at the beginning. Greg, you got some Muppets history for us, right?
Yeah, I got a little bit of Muppets history. I'll say the same as Garrett. I wouldn't call myself a super fan, but I do I do find myself drawn to the Muppets every time something new comes out, and I also am one of those people that loves to scour wikis religiously. So I've spent many an hour reading about Muppets and watching a lot of Muppets content.
Awesome.
So we'll
Download
start
it to me, man.
We'll start at the very
Teach
beginning.
me.
I guess the real idea here is we're going to talk about the Muppet series leading up to Muppets Now, but I'm going to start with a little bit of history, with the prehistory of the Muppets before the Muppet Show is where we'll start. So in 1962, Rolf the dog was kind of the first prominent Muppet on television. He and Baskerville the Hound is another smaller Muppet character, started appearing in Purina dog chow commercials. That was kind of the first big appearance of a Muppet from the Muppet Show lore. And then shortly thereafter, the following year, Rolf became a regular, almost the co-host on the Jimmy Dean Show. So that was kind of the beginnings of the Muppets. And then Kermit. Then Kermit rose to prominence. He had an appearance, I believe, alongside Rolf on Johnny Carson's Tonight Show. And that was the very first appearance of Kermit in any sort of significant way. And that led to kind of this big boom where the Muppets were on the front page, and the
Muppets went viral.
They went viral, and they started getting attention, and that eventually led to the very first Muppet Show in 1976 to 1981, the first series.
Yeah, it's interesting because the Muppet Show was produced for a British network, and was only aired in the United States in syndication. And for all of you kids out there, let me teach you what syndication was. So you got all these little channels around the country, right? And they get to buy content, right? It's sort of like when you see like a certain movie was bought by Hulu. Basically, you had your Channel 5 in Boston was a Hulu, and you had your Channel 7 in Boston was your Peacock, and you had your Channel 25 in Cincinnati was your Voodoo. And they would pick up programming to fill their airwaves, and that's how the Muppets took over the United States. I was actually surprised to find that out, because you look at all of these huge brands and cultural icons, and you sort of almost expect there to be a network just attached to it, like an ABC or an NBC or a CBS, and the Muppets don't. The Muppets were sort of like their own free agent, just moving around to whoever wanted to take them.
Did you guys watch the Muppet Show as kids? Because for me, that was the only thing. That was my big for whatever reason, that was the thing that was syndicated around where I was, and that's kind of my first and main exposure to the Muppets. And I didn't even realize it was a 1976 show until like today. And I was rewatching the pilot for it, and I was like, wait, when did this come out? Oh my god, it's so old. I watched a lot of this as a kid and never realized it.
So you never scratched your head watching it as a child going like, who the hell's Connie Stevens and Juliet Prowse?
Yeah, I definitely
Gray.
Googled Juliet Prowse.
Yeah. I don't know.
Today.
Like, so yeah, the Muppet Show was had like a second life of syndication on like TNT and Nickelodeon and those cable channels. But you're talking like turn of the century, like year 2000, remember the Game Show Network had like a resurgence.
Yes. Oh yeah.
And I mean, I was watching like 1973 episodes of Match Game.
Oh yeah, I was all on the Nipsey Russell train. I was like, I cannot get enough Charles Nelson Riley.
I'm watching Richard Dawson make out with every Family Feud guest,
Still the greatest host of Family Feud.
I guess when we were growing up, we were used to seeing really old content on different channels.
Yeah.
It's I guess that's what people think when they see Friends on Nickelodeon at night. They just see really old content.
Since I assume we're going to be trying to talk about kind of the content of each of these Muppet series, let's start with what we've got on the Muppet Show, which was a variety show, right? It was a stage show produced by the Muppets that they had celebrities involved in, and it was very of its time, but it a lot of that stuff still stands the test of time. And like Will said, like we were able to watch it when we were young kids, and if you can go back and watch it now, a lot of it still works. And then some of it you go, maybe some of these celebrities are a little too deep cut to, not all of the clips necessarily hold up because you're like, I don't know who Ruth Buzzy is. And apologies to all the Ruth Buzzy fans listening, by the way. Yes. But they also had Rita Moreno and Phyllis Diller and Vincent Price and George Burns and like John Cleese and people who are still on some level relevant. But yeah, the Muppet Show, like it feels very dated, and that's something that I love about the Muppets is that it continues to come back, and every time it comes back, it updates and it tries to feel more modern, and that's kind of the beauty. That's part of the beauty of the Muppets.
It's timeless. It's almost like the Muppets live forever. So throw the Muppets in 1976, throw the Muppets in 2020, and see how they sort of adapt to their surroundings, right? Yeah. And sometimes it works better than others. So there have been four Muppet shows. There was the Muppet Show.
Yep.
And then Muppets Tonight.
Yes.
And then the Muppets. And now Muppets Now.
Yeah.
Okay. So the Muppet Show ended around 1981, but then they had the big movie, the Muppet movie in 1979, which started a whole slew of movies.
Yeah, and so that was kind of that's the golden age of the movies. A lot of people would say, a lot of Muppet fans would say, it was Muppet movie in 79, Great Muppet Caper in 81, and Muppets Take Manhattan in 84. And that's kind of like the trifecta of like classic Muppet films.
Yeah, you're talking 3 movies in 5 years in an age where it would usually take 5 years to get a sequel to an original movie. They barreled out a trilogy in 5 years. So it's...
I mean, counterpoint, so did Star Wars, but,
Did they?
Yeah, they were 77, 79, 81, I think.
No. 77 was Star Wars, Empire was 81, and Return was 84, no?
I mean, you're the movie guy, so you're probably right. Counterpoint, I'm probably wrong. So
Empire Strikes Back was 1980.
Okay.
And Return of the Jedi was 1983. So I guess you're talking
6
like
years.
six years or so.
Pretty
so your
impressive.
point still stands, I suppose.
I suppose.
So kind of after those 3 films is where there was a little bit of a lull in the late 80s. And then in 1992, they kind of came back to films. But at this point, Jim Henson had passed away, and it was kind of a new era. And they started with kind of doing a little bit parody things. They did Muppet Christmas Carol in 92. They did Muppet Treasure.
We have a whole episode on the Muppets Christmas Carol in our back episodes. We deep dive into that episode.
Oh, yeah.
Deeper than we probably should have. But
Yeah, well, it's my favorite Christmas movie, so.
Good for you.
It's a good one.
Thank you.
Then in February 96, Muppet Treasure Island landed. So another kind of parody film that had the Muppet characters live within another pre-existing story.
Taking public domain stories that were free, I suppose,
Yeah.
right? And throwing the Muppets in it. I mean, it's a brilliant business move.
Absolutely.
That's all. It was a brilliant business move.
And then 1 month later was the premiere of Muppets Tonight, which was kind of that was the debut of Clifford, who hasn't really shined since then. But also the big characters to come out of that show, I think it's worth noting, Pepe, the King Prawn, and Bobo the Bear both made, if not their first appearances, their first prominent appearances on Muppets Tonight. So
I don't want to step on something I was going to talk about later, but I might as well say it right now. Bobo the Bear is my favorite Muppet.
he is hilarious.
He's my favorite Muppet. He's excellent in everything. He's deadpan. He can't even turn his body. The fact that he's so like stiff makes him funnier. Mm-hmm. The voice, who does the voice? Is it a famous Muppet voice actor, or is it like a new kid on the block?
Yeah, Bill Barrett is one of the he's one of the Muppet crew. Cool. The thing about Bobo though is he's so expressive too. They added some robotics, some sort of animatronics to his eyebrows, and it just like makes him one of the funniest Muppets. And that's not to talk down to any of the others. I'm a big fan of Dr. Teeth, and I keep coming back to Pepe because prior to 1996 he didn't even exist, and now everybody considers him one of the one of the gang, one of the classic one of the classic characters, and he's really
Yeah.
of the more modern era.
It's interesting.
So I don't know. What about Muppets Tonight, guys? Do you have any thoughts on
I
that?
enjoyed Muppets Tonight. I feel like that was when I was watching, the TGIF and on ABC, and I loved Muppets Tonight. We were watching the pilot episode,
I did
which
as well.
featured a guest spot with Michelle Pfeiffer.
Yeah.
Which, I don't know. When I think of Muppets Tonight, for some reason, I always think of Bobo the Bear and Garth Brooks, and I think Bobo the Bear was playing like security, right? Was that his role on Muppets Tonight?
Yeah, he was the
He
security
was sort of
guard.
like the bouncer outside.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think what Muppets Tonight got right was the spirit of the Muppet Show, the show behind the scenes, but still putting on a good show.
Yep.
You could sort of what was that Aaron Sorkin show that was supposed to be about like
Studio
Saturday
60?
Night Live? Studio 60.
Yeah.
Studio 60. You could almost compare Muppets Tonight to Studio 60.
A little bit.
But Studio 60 was a show behind the scenes of a show. However, the show that they were depicting was terrible. So while Aaron Sorkin could write excellent dialogue about the goings-on behind the scenes of a show, when it came time for them to actually put on the show within the show sucked.
Yeah, he doesn't know how to write an SNL, so you could
Exactly.
write. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so Muppets Tonight greater than Studio 60 on the Sunset
I
Strip.
think that's okay to say. The other thing about Muppets Tonight is, and again, it only lasted 22 episodes, so it doesn't have the longevity of the original Muppet Show. It had,
Man,
I think,
only 22 episodes?
only 22, and actually only 10 of them ever aired on TGIF on ABC. It was canceled, and it all kind of got tossed onto Disney Channel after that.
Good God, why do I feel like that show was on for 7 years? Is that
No,
just because
1
time
year.
went by so much more slowly when you were young?
I think so.
You
I
know-
think so. But another thing about it is that, unlike the original Muppet Show, I think they had a better idea of who to bring in as guests. Looking at at who they had on, they had Michelle Pfeiffer, John Goodman, Billy Crystal, Sandra Bullock, Jason Alexander, Whoopi Goldberg, all people who are not just of their time, but people who have stood the test of time as
Those are
celebrities and
A-listers.
actors. Yeah, A-list performers.
A-listers,
Yeah.
like without a doubt, A-list, like no doubt about it, A-listers coming on and really showing that the Muppets were not something to mess with. Like the Muppets were deserving of A-list.
I think too, like the fact that the Muppets, like in '96, I think it's easier to pull A-listers if you're the Muppets at that point, right? Because in '76, it's like we're a show about Muppets and we're putting on a show. Like, who can we get on this? At the time, it's become an institution by the time that they're doing Muppets Tonight. So I think it's much easier to get those types of people to participate.
Yes, I agree. And it's funny, the economists are talking about like a V-shaped recovery when it comes to this COVID recession. But it's sort of, if you look at the Muppets and their cachet, I would say that Muppets Tonight was probably their apex, where they had the most clout to get the A-listiest of A-listers.
Yeah.
So moving on from Muppets Tonight, the next thing that came out was Muppets from Space, which I think is a really funny movie. That was in 1999. It was the
I
first
don't
time
think I've ever seen it.
It's a pretty funny flick. It's all about kind of Gonzo's origins and gives a lot of screen time to both Rizzo and Pepe, as well, as those are kind of his closest friends in the more modern lore. And that was a pretty good one. And then we kind of enter a little bit of the dark ages for the Muppets, where they kind of faded into obscurity a bit. There was a direct-to-DVD film called Kermit's Swamp Years, followed by It's a Very Muppet Christmas, which is like It's a Wonderful Life version of the Muppets. They followed that up in 2005 with Muppet Wizard of Oz, starring Brandy. And then A Muppet Christmas, Letters to Santa. Those were all TV movies, kind of the dark ages for the Muppets, not exactly
Yeah, I wouldn't even act like those exist. I mean, what we're talking about is that 99 was Muppets from Space, and we wouldn't hear from the Muppets really for another, 12 years?
Pretty much. It wasn't until The Muppets in 2011, starring Jason Segel, that the Muppets kind of came back in a big way. They introduced the new character Walter, and also like the Muppets. That film is maybe the funniest, smartest of the Muppets. It feels like it's kind of at the height of modern comedy. It feels very current.
Yeah, I watched it for the first time today because I was sort of trying to get all my Muppets in, and I started watching the original Muppet movie, and it sort of just drags in the middle a little bit. And I was just like, well, let me throw on the Muppets from 2011, and I was in the entire time. You're talking like visually, it's shot beautifully, like in a way that they finally figured out a way to shoot the Muppets in a modern and interesting, way. The cinematography's good. You could see the fuzz on, Kermit's Muppety skin. Jason Segel wrote it, along with another writer whose name escapes me, but...
is it true that that movie came about because of the storyline in Forgetting Sarah Marshall? About him redoing, like, the Muppet vampire musical, basically?
I think it's entirely possible. It definitely gave him some clout, because I think in Sarah Marshall he worked with some of the Muppet performers.
Oh, okay.
So he kind of opened the doors to getting into the Muppet universe.
Well, it's just that's interesting. If it played a part in it, it's interesting that we did go 12 years without hearing from the Muppets until a tertiary project kind of breathed life back into it, and then you have Jason Segel kind of manning the helm.
Yeah, I mean, you're also talking about these Muppets movies. By comparison, comparing to other big blockbuster films, they're low budget movies. Like, that 2011 Muppets movie was $45 million budget, and it ended up grossing $165 million. So, a movie that was about, does anybody care about the Muppets anymore? Well, clearly they got their answer. And then in 2014, what came next, Greg?
Then in 2014, the direct sequel to the Muppets was Muppets Most Wanted, which jam-packed the film with even more celebrities than before, and was also a really fun time. Was it as good as the first one? I wouldn't say that, but like, it's a blast. It's hard not to enjoy the Muppets, and that's why throughout this whole thing, there's always moments of joy, and there's always laughter, no matter what era we're talking about.
Yeah, and the Muppets Most Wanted only made half of what the Muppets made. So it only brought in $80 million. So I think that's always been sort of the story of the Muppets, where they come back with a bang, and then how do we follow this up? How do we keep the Muppets relevant? How do we make people care about the next thing the Muppets are going to do? The great thing about the 2011 Muppets was that it paid such great homage to the original Muppet movie, and it was all about nostalgia. And so it's interesting. I was reading a lot of articles about the Muppets movies ranked, and this one writer felt that the 2011 Muppet movie focused too heavily on the human characters, and that Muppets Most Wanted was much better because it was more Muppet-centric. Now, if we're looking at box office dollars here, we should take away from the 2011 Muppets that maybe we should have humans be the centerpiece, with the Muppets being the surrounding cast.
I don't know if it has to do with how much money was made, but it was certainly using a human as the entry point for a new generation of kids who aren't really familiar with the Muppets. That was a smart move. Why
well,
the
I'm just talking about
didn't...
Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say why the follow-up didn't stick the landing. I think it's still up for debate. I don't know if it has to do with the fact that the lead wasn't a human, or if just... I don't know. Maybe the Muppets didn't set the world on fire as much as we all hoped it would.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm thinking just from a storyline perspective. And when we get to 2015, a year after Muppets Most Wanted, we had the ABC pilot that only lasted one season. What was that? It was just called The Muppets.
Yes.
and that was sort of like the Office NBC sitcom motif.
That was like
there.
that was like The Office meets 30 Rock, but it's the Muppets.
Yeah.
So they were still producing their own show, and it was honestly, I really liked the show. It had problems though, and there's a reason it ended so quickly. And I'll at least I'll tell you what I think about what happened there.
Yeah, go for it.
So the first half of the season very much is trying to hit that sitcom style extra hard. They put a lot of time into the romantic relationship between Kermit and Piggy, between Fozzie and his love interest played by Ricky Lindholm, and they spent a lot of time with just kind of the core 4 or 5 characters. And even though there's a periphery of Muppets all surrounding them, they don't get a lot of screen time, they don't get a lot of story, and it just kind of felt like when you're watching a Muppet show, you want a Muppet ensemble blowing it up. And for the first half of that season, prior to the winter break where they had time to kind of regroup, they didn't do that. And the ratings...
Well, they replaced showrunners halfway through, right?
They did replace showrunners. Do you have that information?
And interestingly enough, there's a lot of... Listen, there are plenty of shows that change showrunners, but very few shows change showrunners in such a public fashion. And The Muppets was one that did it in such a public fashion, so much so that the new showrunner did like a whole Hollywood Reporter interview talking about, what's going to change, what they got wrong, what they're going to write, that basically admitting that what you saw before, we know we didn't put our best foot forward. I'm putting in new changes that is going to take the show to the next level. But I think at that point it was just too late.
Exactly, because it took a notable turn when it came back from its winter hiatus and the new showrunner had taken over, where suddenly, like, so many more Muppets were involved, and it just felt like much more of an ensemble and overall, like, an even funnier show, but kind of the damage had been done. They
also added a human foil, too, right? The network rep showed up in the show, guy from the Mindy Project.
I don't recall the actor's name. But.
Yeah, it was an actor from the Mindy Project, and I feel like my personal opinion is that the Muppets are at their best when they have a solid human foil and a solid human advocate, and talented actors who know how to play off of the Muppets. And God, what was the other thing? Oh. I also think the biggest risk with the Muppets, the biggest challenge, is introducing new Muppets, right? So Bobo the Bear, home run, right? You're talking about the Muppets movie in 2011. I really, really, really like Walter.
Yeah.
I found him to be super sympathetic, really well written, well performed. And then you get to the Muppets show, the Muppets... show in 2015, where we're introduced to Kermit's new love interest, who like replaces Piggy, and she's like, I don't even. It's the most awkward looking Muppet I've ever seen.
Yeah, well, she's just there to kind of cause a rift and kind of create the drama that we need. I mean, she's not. I don't think the long-term plan was to keep her around forever.
See, I think the long-term was to keep her around for a bit. And then they just decided that, this is not where we want to go. And they just wrote her off the show. It's a lot easier to write a Muppet off of a show than you do an actor off of a show.
I will say before we move on from the 2015 Muppets series, I think some of the best stuff that came out of it was... One, I think the character of Uncle Deadly kind of found his legs in the Muppet world. He found his voice. He'd always been there. I mean, I believe he had a scene with Vincent Price way back when on the original Muppet Show, but he kind of got lost over the years, and they kind of found a new way to use him by the time we hit 2015. And now he's a very prominent, funny character.
Yeah, he's excellent. He's definitely a great sidekick to
Piggy.
Miss Piggy.
Yeah. And then the other thing that I did like was Kermit finally realizing that Miss Piggy's annoying. that there's, you know, like, it's his ex-girlfriend now on the new series, and now Kermit's attitude toward Piggy is forever changed, and you can see it on the new Muppets Now show too, where it's like, oh great, here comes Piggy. I'm gonna have to deal with this. I love how that is now Kermit, because Kermit otherwise is such a positive, uplifting character, and he always tries to bring everybody, lift everybody up, and add
He's
this
an
positivity.
eternal optimist.
Yeah, but Piggy is the one thing that makes him go, God, you know, like he just knows that, like, this is gonna turn into a show. So I like that was kind of something that added to his character in, like, a significant way at this point.
Yeah, I rewatched a couple episodes of this, and I liked them a lot better than I remembered. And I think if this show came out now, as is, and it was a Disney Plus original, I think it would be a hit. I don't think the Muppets belong on network TV, because look at what's on network TV. Like, you've got procedurals, and that's what people want to watch on these networks, and that's what gets the CSIs, the NCISs. Hawaii Five-0 apparently has been on the air for like 27 years now. I don't know. It hasn't been that long, but I think they're on their like 10th season. The Muppets just doesn't belong, and I feel like that's less of a knock on them and more of a knock on just the television audience in general. So I think if you had that Muppets show having an episode every week, or even, like, you know, maybe once a month have a new episode of that Muppets, I think it would be popular in Disney Plus. But here we are, 2020, and we're getting this new show called Muppets Now.
And very much in the tradition of the other shows, they've tried to modernize the idea of a variety series, that the Muppets are still running the show. They're trying to put together a TV show, but now it exists in the era of social media, and so that's kind of the angle they've taken with Muppets Now.
Yeah, and I have no problem with that idea. So I told you that Bobo the Bear is my favorite Muppet. Do you know who my least favorite Muppet is?
Is it Miss Piggy?
Well, she's a close number 2.
Is it that weird Scooter turkey thing they used on this episode?
No, it's Scooter. I do not like Scooter. So the fact that Scooter is the tent pole of the entire motif is sort of like, I could do without. But let's go through this episode. What worked for you? What did you like about this? So we've only seen the first episode, right? So a lot of reviews you'll read online, they've been given many episodes ahead of time so they can get a better idea of what the show is going to become. We only have 22 minutes to really talk about. So what worked for you?
Honestly, I kind of go back and forth, but I do think that the format worked for me. I think there's some changes or tweaks that I wish that they would make, and hopefully they will make over the upcoming episodes. But I do think to take the idea of they're putting on a show, how do people put on shows now? They do it through a social media lens. There's these YouTube videos. There's these vloggers. There's some tweaks to the sketches I wish they would make, but that concept works for me. And even so much that while I was watching it, I was wondering if there are other types of shows that could take this format, which is in a lot of ways a very like kind of Zoom web conferencey heavy way with small ensembles within the screen, and take that skeleton and apply it to creating new episodes of other types of shows. That is to say, I still had issues with some of the ways that they chose to execute on that, especially from a Muppets perspective, where I want to see a lot of them on the screen at the same time. But the structure made sense to me, and I do think that kind of worked for me.
Greg, you want to go, or you want me to?
Yeah, I'll throw in a little something. So I mean, I struggled a little bit with the digital nature of it. I just didn't think it looked very fun. It was a little. It just didn't feel as Muppet Showy when you're looking at all these like computer screens moving stuff around. Like the beauty of the Muppets, and when the Muppets are at their peak, is when you're just looking at it and it's like this practical effects being used to see them. So, you know, naturally when you use all kinds of digital effects, I get turned off a little bit. And not all of the sketches worked for me per se, But by the end, when I was just gonna say by the end, when we get to the RuPaul sketch, and we keep bringing in different Muppets to interrupt in the various different ways, that's when the show really clicks. That's when that was the first time for me while watching the episode where I went like, this feels like Muppets, because it provided all the different voices and all the different perspectives of the various Muppets in one scene, causing the chaos that Muppets do when they make their own show. And that worked the best for me. Whereas there was like the Swedish Chef scene where that was a little annoying to me, because they teased the opening where it says, what was the name of the segment? Do you recall, Garrett?
Okie dokie cooking?
Okie dokie cooking. And you see the intro and you're like, oh, this is going to be a Swedish Chef thing. And then it opens up on this turkey talking to Carlina Will making food, and Swedish Chef's just kind of like also there. I was ready and revved up for like a full-on Swedish Chef disaster fest.
Well, I think that whole sketch I think they were sort of trying to do like a friendly Chopped.
Yeah.
Where they were both supposed to be making the same dish or like different versions of the dish. And I actually thought that was one of the sketches that does have legs, because I now want to make that Caribbean curry chicken dish. Much like those videos that Tasty puts out where it like, quickly time lapses like recipes being made. I found it to be very modernly relevant in a way. Throwing the chef in there, the Swedish Chef in there to get like Uber Eats to bring in a dish, and just mayhem of him trying to make this dish. I was laughing, and I was learning how to cook a dish at the same time. So that was one of the sketches that I actually enjoyed. When you're talking like lifestyle, the Miss Piggy sketch, is Miss Piggy popular? Do people love Miss Piggy, or is she just necessary there? Is she just necessary, immensely necessary to be there?
I think she's popular.
Yeah, I think she's pretty popular. I don't think it was the best opening, because when it opened on her sketch, I didn't know what the show was. I was confused for a while, because also it was a long sketch. I felt like it went like 7, 8, 10 minutes even. And I was like, but what is Muppets Now? And I didn't understand what it was until we got past that. So I don't think, it wasn't terrible. I just don't feel like it was the best way to start the presentation of the new series. By the end of the episode, I kind of got it a little better, having seen all of it as one package, but just opening on Piggy like that, I went, what are we watching, and what is the format here?
I think one of the things that worked, and I understand why they didn't do it this way, but one of the pieces of Piggy's storyline that worked the best for me from a comedic value was her being an influencer and taking the Instagram photos of like, send me free makeup. Like, that was very funny to me. And I understand you needed the photo bomber aspect in there to tie those threads together. But had you started on that, I think I definitely would have gotten it off the bat. Like, oh, this is a show about the Muppets in the digital era, and they're all going to be doing these different types of like tropes that we see on YouTube channels, Instagram, TikTok, etc. So yeah, I think that could have worked better as an opening, and it also was the funniest part for me.
It was interesting because you're watching this and you're sort of seeing it and thinking, wait, did they make this during quarantine?
100%.
Because it looks like they could have made it during quarantine, right? But really, a lot of this was shot a year ago, and this was just the motif that they had originally planned. And it just really just works during quarantine really well. I found the Miss Piggy being an influencer. There was one line that Uncle Deadly has when she's eating the potato chips, and he goes, "Oh, we'll just save that for your personal." Just sort of pointing out that every single one of these influencers has a personal Instagram page, and their quote unquote branded one. Just a throwaway line, and I feel like that's when the Muppets are just so good, when they're in tune with pop culture, and they can throw in a line like that winks to somebody like me, saying like, hey, yeah, we do a lot of these like waka waka jokes because we know them inside and out. But we know the world enough that we can wink at you and let you know we know more than what we're putting forward right now. And you just sort of like need to keep your guard up and wait for those little one-liners that I laughed out loud. I laughed for like a minute straight. I don't know why. Maybe it was just like the way he delivered it. But there's also my MVP for this episode was Howard.
Oh,
Howard
yes.
the pig.
Yeah, he's
Who
great.
shows up during that RuPaul segment. The outfit, the body language, it's so weird talking about a Muppet's body language, but really, you know, most of their personality is body language, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's what
Howard's-
separates the Muppet performers from any other puppeteer. Like, they have mastered the craft of bringing these characters to life more than just in voice and more than just a flappy head. They all move uniquely, and they all, and yeah, Howard in particular, like, he just has such a
Oh my God! So
light
Howard
touch.
Howard is this queer pig who's obsessed with RuPaul, and the way just everything about Howard's performance in this sketch is wonderful, and the way he just sort of Howard puts his hand on RuPaul's arm almost like they're the only two in the room, and when Kermit asks a question, Howard turns to Kermit as if like, why are you interrupting my moment? Just sort of taking over the entire scene. I think there were enough laughs in this that made me say, hey, is this the perfect show? No, but also it's a pilot.
Yeah.
Technically we'll still call it a pilot, and it has room to grow. Do I love the overall motif of Scooter? God, I hate you, Scooter. I hate you so much. Scooter dragging, files into a Dropbox to upload to YouTube. Do I find that compelling? No, but do I even find it necessary? Do you find it necessary?
Yes and no. So I don't find it necessary given the show that we were given, but I do think I would have liked to have seen more of the backstage production aspect, because that is what we saw a lot of in both the 76 and 96 Muppet shows. So that simple framing device of clicking and dragging and getting people IMing you about being upset, that if that's all you're going to give me, then throw it out. But if you could give me the backstage production of Miss Piggy's vlog and of like the cooking show and more of that kind of stuff, or even going back and forth as they're having those conversations over Zoom, maybe as they're trying to produce these pieces, that's going to give me that energy that felt missing that we had in the earlier shows.
Like if you give me a Zoom writers room meeting on
that sounds
Muppets
delightful.
Now, that sounds delightful compared to just, Scooter.
Can you get Animal to hit the mute button? Like, probably not, but that sounds funny. Like, I would enjoy it.
Yeah, I completely agree with you there. So we had, what do we have? Like, it sort of felt like an episode of Animaniacs in that we had these little segments, these little skits. You had your lifestyle with Miss Piggy, where it had Tay Diggs, I think. He was on there, but frankly, it's funny. You have a celebrity on there, and Uncle Deadly ends up being the MVP of that sketch.
Yeah.
Right, and he's the number 3 in the call sheet. You've got Mupp Close and Personal with Kermit and RuPaul, and Howard steals the scene. Howard the pig. He's number 4 or 5 on the call sheet behind Gonzo and other Muppets. Do you think that's purposefully done? Or do you think it's just sort of, we know a lot of these Muppets so much that any kind of new blood that enters the scenario becomes instantly more exciting?
What I think is that a lot of these Muppet performers, a lot of them have been doing it for a long time, and a lot of them are playing characters that were first originated by Jim Henson or Frank Oz or some of the older guard, and now it's kind of, now that we've got a new generation of Muppets, the performers are finding, like they've kind of created or given life to characters that otherwise maybe didn't exist before. Bobo, again, Bobo the Bear, 1996 was his first claim to fame. And so now Bill Barretta's playing that character for a number of years, and he knows how to give that character life. And the same thing with Uncle Deadly. And I think what's happening is these performers are finding new voices and new characters, and they're not constrained by the original 15 to 20 Muppets that we all know and love, and they're just kind of expanding their horizons, and it's refreshing to see as fans too.
That's a really good point, and that's a really good point. It didn't even dawn on me, but there is Jim Henson's shoes are big shoes to fill, and when you take over a character like Kermit the Frog, or any other original Muppets character, you don't want to screw it up, and you don't want to be the voice actor or the puppeteer where people go, that's it, it's no longer Kermit the Frog. So you're probably less apt to take risks, whereas when you get a Bobo the Bear, when you get an Uncle Deadly, you're willing to go above and beyond and just sort of take that leap. Let's experiment a little bit. By the way, the 2015 The Muppets sitcom, in the second episode, I think, Bobo the Bear is selling his daughter's Girl Scout cookies amongst the office, and it's immensely relatable and utterly fantastic. So I recommend going to watch that.
I'm pulling it up so I can watch it later. It sounds very funny.
It's excellent.
There was something I wanted to say on that, though.
Yeah, go ahead, Will.
In addition to talking about the MVPs of these sketches, though, one of the things that I was finding as I was doing a little bit reading into this is that a lot of these sketches, effectively, were heavily improvised. That was kind of the idea. They were supposed to be sort of improvised sketches. And I think one of the weaknesses of this show is that a lot of the celebrity guests are not great improvisers. Like,
yes,
there was a lot of yesing, not a lot of yes-anding, and I'm not capable of doing it either. But, like, I think you see, like, Taye Diggs, and he's, like, trying to keep up, but he's not the star because he is not trained that way. And I think that the Muppets become the stars because they know their character, they know the role they're willing to fill. And what I would love to see is people with more improv comedy chops in those roles, because I think that could really elevate the show in a lot of ways and bring a new take to it instead of just having a familiar face that's just trying to keep up with the Muppets.
That's a really good instinct. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the Muppets are... Sorry. You want to go ahead?
Yeah, I was just going to say, that's a really good instinct, because you're right. Taye Diggs and Carlina Will and RuPaul, they all just kind of were going like, yeah, they were trying to play along, but they didn't add significant comedy to the scene. Whereas if you brought in people with improv backgrounds, a lot of the people from the UCB schools, or like a Paul Rudd type, or an Elizabeth Banks, or like an Elizabeth Banks who appeared in the first episode of the Muppets sitcom in 2015, they just naturally would be able to play off the Muppets and kind of add more to the table other than just the idea of a celebrity face.
Yeah, I think that, correct me if I'm wrong, but I sort of feel like the Muppets are at their best when the Muppets are playing off of the celebrities.
Yes.
Versus when celebrities are playing off of the Muppets. Because I want the celebrities to just be their celebrity selves, right? And the Muppets are supposed to add that color to the scene. And trying to have a celebrity like RuPaul yes-anding, I feel like they're sort of just, they're going the wrong route. I think the whole idea is you want to write stuff for RuPaul, or get RuPaul or someone in a situation or an environment where they're extremely comfortable. RuPaul didn't look very comfortable. Like, Kermit the Frog looked looser, So I think it's all about sort of getting the like you said, the right talent, the right human celebrities to show up, be comfortable, and be able to roll with the punches. But relying on somebody like who was like Taye Diggs to play off of Miss Piggy, like, no, Taye Diggs is supposed to be the straight man in the sketch. Like, all the humans typically are the straight men.
Yeah.
In the sketches, so just write them that way, so that
well, that's the thing. If you're going with an improv format, use improv actors. If you're going to hire actors who are not great at improv, you need to write them a little bit more, so that way the Muppets can do the improv side of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It'll be interesting to see how this show evolves, because I think there is definite room for evolution. I don't know how many they have in the can currently.
One of the articles I was reading about this suggested, and I don't know if it's true, but suggested that they had already recorded all of this season and they're just going to be dripping them out. So it's going to be tougher for them to see how people react to it and make changes. But, you know, it's the Muppets and it's Disney Plus. I think they got a pretty long runway. So maybe we don't see these changes in this season, but maybe next season. I don't know.
Yeah, and I think they definitely have a little more rope to go with because they're not worried about. They're not incredibly worried about ratings, so they're not at huge risk of getting canceled like the 2015 sitcom was at risk of getting canceled. So they're not sort of on that the hourglass is not running for Muppets Now. So whether they have 10, 12 in the can and they'll see how people react and then come back to the drawing table for season 2, I think that's fine because I don't think when the new Muppets Nows are done, I don't think people are going to be like, oh God, I need more Muppets Now. They're just like any other streaming show. They're just happy when something enters their world.
Yeah,
right.
Absolutely.
And I hope, I really want the Muppets to succeed because I find them to be timeless. I find in this era of just utter doom and gloom, the optimism of the Muppets and being able to be funny and be entertaining in an optimistic way, it's a dying art. And those who do make a living off of it, sometimes it feels overly forced. So it doesn't seem very, God, what's the word? It doesn't seem genuine. And I'm thinking of Ellen DeGeneres, who's in the news this week.
Sure.
I'm sure we all have Ellen DeGeneres stories that we have heard over the years. But, you know, watching that 2015 Muppets sitcom, you know, Miss Piggy giving off quite a few Ellen DeGeneres vibes, if you ask me. I wonder how many in the writers' room were writing a little bit into that Miss Piggy character, being that talk show host, that nightmare talk show host. So do you guys have anything else to add?
No, I'm just very excited about more Muppets coming down the line. Whatever, you know, like maybe this wasn't my favorite Muppet series to date as of yet, but I'm going to be watching next week when the next episode lands because, again, like you said, the Muppets bring a sense of joy that is so rare nowadays that it really like lifts the spirits.
Yeah, and I think for me, even the sketches that didn't work personally, the Okie Doke Kitchen didn't work for me, but I heard that Danny Trejo's going to be on it in a couple episodes, maybe next episode.
Yes.
Making tacos?
Yes.
Making Trejo tacos?
And that sounds delightful to me, so I
love it.
I'm in.
Oh, have you guys had Trejo tacos?
No, but I have the donuts. Not a huge fan,
Oh,
but the tacos I've heard are good.
The tacos are excellent. I guess my only question is possibilities wise, if Muppets Now becomes pretty popular within like the streaming world, maybe not quite Mandalorian level, but you know, somewhere. So Disney bought the Muppets back in 2004. So they bought Star Wars for what, like $4 billion?
Yeah.
They bought Marvel for what, like $2 billion? Something, I forget the numbers, but it's in the B's, the billions, okay, for Star Wars and Marvel. They bought the Muppets in 2004 for $75 million with an M.
Wow.
It's shocking. Shockingly small number. But
We
in
almost could have done
2004, I guess that's where we saw that's post Muppets from Space. That's pre the Muppets reboot. So they, like Greg said, it was the Dark Ages.
Yeah.
They got an intellectual property at a pretty, I would say, it's a pretty good price there, and they've made some money off of it. They just haven't figured out how to make that billions of dollars off of the Muppets, and I don't know if there is that much money left in the banana stand.
I feel
Maybe
like there's merchandising options that they have just not taken advantage of. Like, there should be stuffed animals of the Muppets at every Disney store, and there's not. You know, like, it's always been strange to me when you go to Disneyland or Disney World, and for a period they had, what was that Muppet, that screen experience.
Muppet Vision 3D?
Muppet Vision 3D was there, but then you couldn't find any Muppet merch. You'd have to like scour the whole park to find it. And I just felt like that's always been something that Disney's not really... I don't know if they believe in it as much as the people who are fans of it do.
Well, I'll tell you this. Merch runs Disney. So ever since Bob Chapek took over Disney Parks, he came from the merchandise background. That's how he ran Disney Parks. And now with him taking over for Bob Iger, I'm seeing a lot more Muppet merch, frankly. And I think a lot of times there is merch being put about as like tests. Like there were times where I saw a lot of like Chippendale's Rescue Rangers, and I'm like, are they just throwing this crap out here to see like, is there a demand for this? And if there is, we throw more out. And if it passes like tests 3, 4, and 5, then we can seriously consider, building off of this. There are these things. They're called like Loungefly backpacks. They're like $80 a pop, right? And these people collect them religiously. And there's a really popular Kermit the Frog one that is very hard to find, and it keeps selling out. So I think there is demand there. I just don't know how you can... I don't know how you can make the Muppets socially relevant in 2020 when Beyonce can only keep the world's attention for 24 hours. And maybe that's the struggle of every creative in this town. Like, what are we doing this for?
For 5 minutes. For 5 minutes of fame. Yeah.
Oh, God. The 15 minutes of fame has turned into 5, if you're lucky.
I mean, did you see the Spotify CEO comments this week? He was basically saying that artists can no longer release music every 3 to 4 years and expect to remain relevant, which everyone had a big, like, that's what musicians do. Don't challenge the artistic process. But then also everyone's like, but also kind of true.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know. Maybe the Muppets should get a podcast.
Well, the Muppets are welcome anytime on this podcast. And with that, I think we'll end this discussion on Muppets Now. I'm looking forward to more. I'm looking forward to more of anything that is, frankly, going to bring some happiness to my otherwise dreary days, man. I mean, it's. I can't believe it's August. It is August, and we're still doing this. So, Greg, do you want to plug your Instagram?
Sure, yeah. Follow me on Twitter.
Tell us about your toys.
Follow me on Twitter at It's Greg Hahn. And Garrett likes my toys. I know it. They're available to look at on It's Greg's Toys. That's my Instagram account. It's just toys. Enjoy it.
I can only spend about 10 seconds max on Instagram these days, because now when you scroll through Instagram, it's a bunch of photos of people hanging out with friends not wearing masks, and it makes me angry. So
I only follow toy accounts. It's not a problem.
Exactly.
It is a bastion of happy things for me.
If you don't want to get mad at your friends or family for not wearing masks and not adhering to COVID-19 protocols, and you just want to look at toys that will bring you joy, follow Greg on Instagram.
Thanks.
Will, how about you? What state are you in this time?
I'm in Wisconsin right now, and if you want to see pictures of me hanging out in parks without a mask on, you can check out my Instagram. No, I'm just kidding.
Oh, God.
But yeah, I'm still doing my little COVID protection route around the U.S. So Wisconsin now, Kentucky next month.
You can follow us on Twitter and Instagram. We are at DplusCast, all spelled out, DplusCast. Like us on Facebook. Subscribe to us on YouTube. Where else are we? No, I think that's it.
We're on iTunes, and you gotta leave a review. That is absolutely key. Leave a review,
Rate,
5 stars.
Review,
you know you want it.
Subscribe. 5 stars, because we live, I don't know if you guys realize this, but we live in a society now where it's 5 stars or no stars. Like, if you're an Uber driver and you get anything less than 5 stars, that means you did something wrong.
You get fired.
Right? If you are a Grubhub delivery person, you get anything less than 5 stars, you might get fired. It almost makes the whole star system moot. because it really should just be a thumbs up or a thumbs down at this point. But until we get there, rate us 5 stars, leave a review, and we
Tell
hope
your
to hear from you.
friends. Tell your
Tell your
friends.
friends.
Yeah.
Rate, review, subscribe. Thanks for listening.